present you Professor Heiner Gembris, who has been a professor of satirical psychological convention of education at the Paderborn University and director of the Institute for Research in Musical Ability. On musical ability, his research interests include lifelong development of musical ability, music in aging, musical preferences, and ethics of music history. He has published numerous articles, chapters, and books in these and other topics. And that's why we invited him here, and he has interesting lectures to tell us about his newest research results. Let's give it to him.
Who prepared this conference so brilliantly. My talk is about musical talent in competition. And first of all, I show you a short overview. Music competitions exist in many countries and cultures. And they are documented in history, in music history, which dates back to the ancient Greece. Since the 19th century, a diverse institutionalized competition system has developed in Europe, which forms an essential part of our music culture. Particularly, since the 1980s, the number and variety of music competition has increased considerably. In Germany, there exist about 350 music competitions at present. As an essential goal of music competitions is the discovery and the promotion of musical talents. In addition, they are intended to build musical careers, provide stage and audience experience, and serve to build artistic personality in the public and media. Successful participation in a competition can be decisive for the career of a young musician. In today's era of an oversupply of talented musicians in a tight labor market, it is difficult, especially for young talents, to be invited to concerts without being winners in music competitions. On the other hand, winning competition awards is not a guarantee for a successful career. The pressure of competition and processing the possible disappointment of being dropped out of a competition can also have negative effects, burdening further development and career development. The idea of finding and fostering talent through music competitions may be overlaid by economic interests, all the music contests in the commercial TV, and by political dimensions. This year, the political dimension became particularly clear at the largest and best-known international competition for pop music, the Eurovision Song Contest, ESC. Because of the Russian war of aggression on the Ukraine, Russia was excluded from the ESC this year. The Ukrainian band Kalush Orchestra received most of the votes and became the winner of the competition. Since the next ESC cannot take place in the Ukraine, it will be held in Liverpool, UK. Some theoretical background. It is the essence of any music competition that musical performance has to be assessed. As a rule, expert judgments are used to assess musical performance, sometimes also audience judgments. Musical performance is considered as an indicator of talent, giftedness, or musical potential, which in turn allows to predict the future development of musical achievement in the respective musical domain. Both within psychology and in music, the understanding and definitions of the terms talent and giftedness are very different and controversial. In psychology, the tendency has emerged to understand musical giftedness as a natural potential or capacity for musical learning and the development of musical achievement. In contrast, musical talent is understood as the respective giftedness or potential translated into actual musical achievement. A definition of talent that applies well to music competition has been proposed by McPherson, Blackwell, and Hallam 2000 and 2020. According to this definition, musical talent is understood as, quote, being able to demonstrate competence, e.g. performing, composing, improvising, after one's natural abilities, interpersonal, environmental, and developmental processes have all facilitated development, end of quote. The developmental processes from the potential to musical talent, as well as the influence of developmental context and factors, have been depicted in several theoretical models. Examples include the differentiated model of giftedness and talent in music by McPherson and Williamson 2016, which is adapted from Gagnier's differentiated model of giftedness. Another example is the Talent Development and Achievement Domains Framework, TAD framework by Brackle and colleagues, which is recently published, which is based on the mega model of the talent development model from Subotnik and colleagues. These models contribute to a better understanding of the developmental relationship between musical aptitude, potential, musical performance, and talent. The question of concrete and appropriate criteria of talent and performance assessment is left open in these models. Brackle and colleagues state, quote, assessment measures can be chosen only within the context of specific study and not a priori in a blanket way, end of quote. McPherson and Schubert, 2022, suggest distinguish between criterion-based criteria and norm reference criteria. They explain, quote, musical assessment in formal settings such as concerts, recitals, and examinations seek either to determine the ranking of a performance in comparison with others, norm-referenced, or how well a performance satisfies predetermined examination criteria, criterion-based, end of quote. Music competitions for children and adolescents are mainly based on criterion-based assessment. Musical competitions for young professional instruments or singers prescribe a required repertoire of well-known pieces. They use norm-referenced criteria to rank the musical performances in order of best performance. How do the criteria of music competitions actually look like? According to the guidelines of the juries of the German competition Jugend musiziert, Youth Makes Music, which is open for children and adolescents between the ages of 8 and 21, the musical and technical quality of the works performed is decisive for the assessment of performance. Different aspects of musical and technical quality are listed in the box of the next slide. You see the Jugend musiziert criteria, musical interpretation, sound quality, playing technique, accuracy to the score, stylistic understanding, quality of making music together. This, in contrast, is the criteria for the international competition Neue Stimmen, New Voices for opera singers. There, the official criteria are technical ability, musical interpretation, rhythm, phrasing, expression, voice quality, of course, and artistic personality and presence. And all these four criteria are equally assessed. These examples of evaluation criteria show that even concrete musical criteria remain relatively general and leave much room for subjective perception and evaluation. Now I come to the research on musical contests. In general, there's little academic research dealing with music competition and their participants. One can define four thematic fields. One is political, media, and economic aspects of major competition from a cultural studies perspective, jury assessments, personality of the participants, and mixed group of several topics like self-concept, motivation, educational aspects, and so on. Maria Mantuszewska, to my knowledge, conducted the first empirical studies on contest participants and the reliability of jurors' judgments in the 1960s. The competition that Mantuszewska was investigated is one of the world's most renowned piano competitions, the 6th International Chopin Competition in Warsaw in 1960. This competition, held every 5 years, is open for young pianists aged 17 to 28 years and sets the highest standards of artistic achievement. Former winner of this competition are world-renowned pianists like Martha Argerich, Yundi Lee, or Christian Zimmermann. I would like to give you a short impression of this contest. You can guess who is it who is playing. Wonderful. He received the first prize of this context in 1960. Mantuszewska's studies on the Chopin competition aimed to investigate the nature of musical talent and the factors of success in high-achieving musicians, as well as to examine the reliability and validity of jury judgments. To investigate the role of personality, biography, and environment in the development of musical performance, Mantuszewska collected qualitative biographical data from the competition participant, and she also applied questionnaires and psychometric tests. The results of her study provided a new perspective on the components of musical talent for the research of that time. She writes, as a result of this research, we have formulated the concept of musical talent as a dynamic constellation of interacting characteristics consisting of 5 independent sets of factors, specifically musical abilities, general intelligence, personality characteristics, biographical and environmental factors, and practical qualifications acquired in the process of formal training and individual experience. Our assumption was that none of these 5 sets can alone determine the extent of artistic value of a musical achievement. The part played by each of them is relative and depends on the context of remaining 4 sets. End of this hypothetical concept of musical talent was far ahead of the research of her time. It shows astonishing conformity with today's research. For example, with the multifactorial gene-environment interaction model by Ulland, Hambrick, and Mosing from 2060, and the differentiated model of giftedness and talent in music by McPherson and Williamson, or the talent development in achievement domain framework from Preckel and colleagues. A second study on the 1960 Chopin competition started from the question to what extent the members of the competition jury are consistent or reliable in their judgments. For this purpose, Matuszewska invited the international renowned jurors to rate 7 different blind performances of the Chopin Polonaise Fantasie on a scale from 0 to 25 points. The main result were the extreme inter-individual differences in the expert ratings of the same musical performances. In further analysis, Matuszewska investigated the sources of these discrepancies in assessment. This enabled her to attribute the differences in judgment to personality traits of the jurors, as well as to their affiliation to different schools of pianists. Matuszewska also identified the nationality of the jurors as another factor influencing the expert ratings. More precisely, the affiliation of these nationalities to countries of the former Eastern Bloc or Western countries. She states, quote, that contest took place in 1960 when the political situation in the world and in Europe had some special characteristics which probably may have affected some of the members of the international jury of that competition. End of quote. This description, referring to the East-West confrontation in the Cold War of that time, reminds of our difficult situation in Europe today. Matuszewska concludes from her results, thanks, quote, individual ratings of musical performance are not a reliable measure of musical achievement, even when given by music experts of the highest level. End of quote. This conclusion is clearly confirmed by various studies on the reliability and validity of evaluation of musical performances from the past decades. McPherson and Schubert have provided a comprehensive overview over such studies and a systematic depiction of the factors that influence them. They write, quote, the leitmotif of the present review questions the assumption that musical value can be measured with validity and reliability, quote, end of quote. This leitmotif is confirmed by the dissertation recently published in Germany, which investigated the process of forming judgments on the basis of interviews with jurors and participants in a renowned international competition. This dissertation is by Keynote 2020-2022. The study shows how visual impressions, prior information, and acquaintance with participants, as well as communication, personal connections, and agreements within the jury influence the formation of ratings. The author notes a lack of transparency, objectivity, and fairness, and comes to the clear conclusion, quote, that international competitions are run unfairly. Keynote 2020. Now I come to the Jugend musiziert competition and research on it. In the following, I will like to report on studies that have been conducted on the Jugend musiziert competition in Germany. The annual competition Jugend musiziert is the most important and most influential music competition for children and adolescents in Germany for almost 60 years. The competition was established in 1964 to counteract the shortage of orchestral musicians at that time and to find and to promote young talents. The competition is open for children and adolescents between the ages 8 and 21, and young people from German schools in other European countries, for instance, Serbia, can also take part in this competition. The instruments and ensemble forms, e.g. vocal ensembles, chamber music, announced for the competition changed every year. This is a schema of the construction of this contest. Jugend musiziert is organized in 3 levels. First, the regional level, the federal competition, and the national competition. Participants of the regional competitions who achieve at least 23 out of 25 points receive a recommendation can take part in the federal competition. And the winners of this federal competition can take part in the national competition. And the winners can get special awards, media presence, financial support at this stage. These are the number of participants in the year 2017 when we conducted our study. Research on, that's overview over the back, the competition. I will give you a short impression of the winner concert from 2021. Research on Jugendmusiziert is relatively scarce. When we started our study in 2017, there existed only 7 studies in total. Fundamental studies on competition Jugendmusiziert have been conducted by the music pedagogue and musicologist Hans-Günter Bastian. Bastian started in the mid-1980s with a biographical study on prize winners of the national competition. The subjects of the interview were not only the musical biography, but all the positive and negative experiences with the competition, its role in their own development, etc. Due to time reasons, I will not go into more details of this research. What was in a certain sense the basis for our research. In the following, I would like you to present 3 recent studies we conducted at the Institute of Research on Musical Ability in Paderborn on the participants and the former participants of the Jugendmusiziert competition. We published this results in 3 monographs, and this was published some weeks ago, and we had some other publications on this stuff. So, study 1 is a survey of the participants of the 1970 competition in Paderborn. Study 2 is a follow-up of former participants of the state and national competitions, and study 3 is a follow-up online study on the former members of the Landesjugendorchester Berlin. It's a Berlin State Youth Orchestra, which is all members of this orchestra are former participants, winners of Jugendmusiziert. So, the aim of the study on the participants of the 2070 competition was to gain insight into the background and personality of the competition participants, their motivation, exercise habits, and other aspects. In doing so, earlier results were to be updated and expanded. A new topic, for instance, health and use of digital media, were also to be taken into account. For this purpose, we designed a paper and pencil questionnaire, including some open questions that covers a broad spectrum of questions, which you can see in this slide. Out of approximately 2,260 questionnaires distributed, about 1,140 completely finished questionnaires were returned, about 50% response rate. The age of the participants ranged from 9 to 24 years. The average age was 15 years. 2/3 of the participants were female. Family background, similar to earlier studies by Bastian to WMusically, the participants in the national competition came from upper middle class families with higher education, with a high educational capital and musical environment in which parents and siblings are also involved in music. About 60% of the fathers were academic professions, 11% of them musicians. More of the half of the mothers had also an academic background, including 16% musicians. The proportion of academics among parents is almost 3 times higher than the population average in Germany, which is around 22%. Music has a high value. Parents invest time and money in music lessons. They are present at auditions and concerts and support, especially younger children, in practicing. The majority 75%, lived in a family with their own houses and their own flat. Compared with the percentage of home ownership in Germany, which is only 45%, this percentage of home ownership among the families of the participants in the national competition is 30% higher. The vast majority of respondents, 86%, came from families with above average number of children compared with the general population. These results confirm the findings of Bastian and other studies that show that families engaged in music significantly have a greater number of children compared with the national average. In sum, the family environment of the contestants forms a specific music cultural sociotope, which is characterized by a high normative and practical value of music, above average education, a positive educational climate, and committed family support. These findings are in line with corresponding findings from Bastian studies on the participants on the WMusically contests, as well as with results of Janka Bogunovic, McPherson, Creech, and others. With regard to the personality, which was assessed with a Big Five inventory, the WMusically participants were found significantly more open to new experiences, more introverted, less conscientious, less agreeable, and more emotional unstable compared to the norm sample. However, the effect size were low with moderate to moderate. For the most part, these findings on personality traits are in line with results of earlier studies on the personality of professional musicians. They also fit very well with the trait complex approach to talent development by Ackerman and colleagues, quote, in which cognitive abilities, personal traits, and interests provided clear profiles of clusters and characteristics that matched academic and occupational domains, end of quote. In the self-perception of the participants, then they described the need, the pride to be able to do something musically, the ambition and the need to utilize one's own ability, and the experience of great feelings received by the strongest approval. So these items received the stronger approvals. I have a little bit chaotic manuscript. A little more than a half, 56% of the contestants felt that they could become a great musician. In assessing their own musical talent on a 9-point rating scale, just under a third put themselves in the average range, while 2/3 rated their talent as above average. A minority of 6% chose a maximum value of 9 points and thus showed self-assessment as highly gifted. In sum, it can be said that the competition participants have a positive, realistic musical self-image that reflects a self-confident identity as a musician, but does not give the impression of an elitist, exaggerated self-concept. The first lessons, I come to the practice time. How much time do I have?
Half an hour.
Half an hour. Oh, so I can.
Well.
The first lesson on the instrument took place on average at the age of 7. The data on the weekly practicing time were extremely different and varied from 30 minutes per week to 38.5 hours per week. The average practice time was about 7.5 hours per week. With growing age, the weekly practice time increases from about 6 hours on average for the 8 to 13 years old to up to 9.5 hours for the 18 to 24 years old. Practice times vary also considerably for different instruments. The longest average practice time, nearly 11 hours per week, are found with a piano, and with a violin just under 10 hours per week. The instruments with the shortest practice times are the saxophone and tuba with 3 to 3.5 hours, and voice for just under 4 hours. The extremely high individual variation in practice times are striking. From the perspective of expertise research, the number of practice hours is the decisive factor for development of high performance. One can one would expect or predict that there should not be such a great variation in practice times when this would be true. However, this is not the case. Our findings are consistent with a number of studies that have shown that the amount of practice time required to achieve expertise in a particular domain shows considerably inter-individual variability. They suggest that the importance of practice time for the development of talent has so far been significantly overestimated, and the role of aptitude and specific constellation of personality traits are underestimated. Our results confirm this position. For the first time, our study examined playing-related pain, health, and well-being in the context of music competitions. 3/4 of respondents in our study reporting having playing-related pain during or after playing their instrument. The prevalence of pain is clearly age-dependent. It increases from about 70 to, in the group of the 9 to 33-old, to 85% in the group of the oldest participants. This prevalence of playing-related pain corresponds to that of professional musicians. Problems of the musculoskeletal systems, e.g. neck, shoulder, wrists, and arms, occur most frequently, a finding well known from professional musicians. These and other findings have been already described and discussed in an article in Frontiers in Psychology, which we published some years ago, so I will not go further in them. Making music at a high level requires a great commitment, especially in terms of practice times, which conflicts often with the other demands of school. The multiple workload can lead to a chronic lack of time, stress, and pressure to perform. A clear majority of about 70% of the competition participants stated that they often experience time pressure from conflicts with demands of the school. However, time pressure is only weakly correlated to practice time. According to a representative study, 65 of the 6 to 14 years old feel stressed at school. In comparison, our competition participants do not differ significantly from other children and adolescents in terms of their perception of stress from school. Concerning the positive effects of music making, the competition participants attribute positive effects of music making on their well-being and quality of life, independently from age, gender, and instrumental groups. This supports the assumption that the positive effects of music making on well-being also occur when there is pressure to perform. When we ask the participants concerning their career, 60% of the competition participants said they would consider studying music. Almost a half said that they were considering becoming a professional musician. This raises the question, how many participants actually end up studying music and become professional musicians? So I come to our follow-up studies. We investigated these and other questions in 2 follow-up studies. In the first follow-up study, we asked about 800 former participants of state and national competitions via online questionnaire, which professional and musical pathways they had taken in their lives. We also investigated for the first time whether the former competition participants experience a higher quality of life than the average of the population. To measure the quality of life, we use the WHO quality of life questionnaire, which is well known. In the second follow-up study, we investigated practically the same questions with another sample. Almost 170 former members of the Berlin State Youth Orchestra were interviewed via online questionnaire. The State Youth Orchestras offer former participants of state competitions, Jugend musiziert, the opportunity to gain orchestral experience under quasi-professional conditions with regard to possible career decisions. Therefore, in this study is a special focus on the role of the orchestral experience for the later musical development. The average age of the first follow-up study was 43 years. Male and female participants were equally distributed. The former members of the Berlin State Youth Orchestra in the second study were about 10 years younger and with an average age about 33 years. 2/3 were women and 1/3 were men. The results of both studies are very similar. About 70 to 80% had university degrees, so that the level of education in both studies is extremely high. Almost half of the respondents had a professional job related to music, e.g. employed as an orchestra musician, freelance musician, or educator. In both studies, those who earned their living in non-music related professions also showed a very high level of musical commitment through regular music making on instruments, in ensembles, and singing in choirs. In both studies, 90% stated that they wanted to encourage other people for music. In families, music plays a very important role in the upbringing of children. With regard to the quality of life, the first follow-up study indicated that the quality of life in all measured dimensions, physical and psychological quality of life, social relationships, environment, and the total value of the test are significantly above the average of the general public population. In the second follow-up study with the former members of the Landesjugendorchester Berlin, the quality of life was significantly higher than the norm values in 2 dimensions, environment and in the general quality of life. As a limitation, it has to be taken into account that the increased quality of life cannot be attributed solely to music making, since factors such as education and socioeconomic status have also a positive influence on the quality of life. On the other hand, it can be assumed that the norm samples of the quality of life questionnaire include both musical active and musical inactive people. Compared to a control group with musical inactive people, the effect of musical activity on quality of life presumably would be even more evident. There are some other results. I'm missing the slide. Okay. Some other results are that we had only very few participants who take part in the pop music category of the competition, for instance. And it was not possible to know whether they had won a prize or not. We distributed the questionnaire during the contest, and so we could not ask if did you win a prize in this competition. I come to some conclusions. From my point of view, music competitions offer a unique research opportunity to investigate the nature of giftedness and talent. Participation in music competition is a prominent developmental factor which can be theoretically integrated into existence models of talent development, for example, into the mega model of talent development by Subotnik, Olszewski, Kubilius, and Worrell. According to this model, I show you a picture. This is a model from me. According to this model, the development of musical talent proceeds from the development of ability into competence, to expertise and eminence. Competence means technical confidence in handling music, in performing, teaching music. Music expertise is outstanding musical achievement, and eminence is rare, innovative, top performance. In this model, Jung musiziert is an ensemble, is an example for a competition in a phase of competence development. I put it here. In this case, the participation in the contest leads to more motivation in the weeks and months before, and has some effects after the competition. Many months before the competition starts, the upcoming participation in the competition leads to increasing motivation and intensified practicing, which would not have taken place without the competition participation. After the competition, the effect of participation on musical and personality development depends on subjective and objective factors, e.g. competence, competition success, experiences in the context of the competition, and how these experiences are processed. This depends on the personality of the participants as well as on the environment, teachers, family, and other relevant persons. Similarly, this applies to competitions whose participants require already highly developed domain-specific expertise. Examples of this were the Chopin competition in Warsaw or the Neue Stimmen, New Voices competition for opera singing. These competitions are located in the phase of the advanced development of expertise. in which the decision for a musical career has been already made and highly professional performance is achieved. So that suggests a successful career as soloist. From a longer perspective, from a long-term developmental perspective, the question of sustainability of the effects of music competition arises. Evidence for sustained effects of musical competition comes from Bastian's study and our own follow-up studies. These results show that a large proportion of the former participants and prize winners go on to music-related professions, and those who have that have taken up professions outside the music field develop considerably music cultural generativity as musical expert and cultural careers, and pass the music from music culture from generation to the next generation. This corresponds to findings from your study, and you have written one even can speak of a transgenerational transfer of family values that refer to a positive valuation of high achievement, goals and standards, and the idea that success is achieved through personal efforts, activity, discipline, and dedication, belief in oneself and one's ability. That's the same thing. How much time do I have?
After this support, 15 minutes.
I would the Neue Stimmen competition for opera singers is an example for a sustainable approach to music competition. This competition focuses on discovering and supporting of the world's best singers, quote, who receive ongoing long-term assistance not only during the competition, but also through masterclasses, concerts, seminars, and coaching sessions. In this context, professional networking, the use of digital techniques, social media presence, and professional development play an important role. I would like to show you a short excerpt from the project film L'amour de loin, Love from a Distance, of the digital masterclass Neue Stimmen from the COVID-19 pandemic year 2020. Oh, that's my limitation. I skipped the slide. So, but now we are at this slide. A crucial question is how to get started in the career and where the career paths of awardees and non-awardees lead. Given the difficult labor market conditions and discouraging future prospects, shorter singing careers and increasing freelance and patchwork careers are the expected necessitating alternative professional scenarios. As one of author writes, he had described the job market for musicians. In order to promote alternative professional scenarios, it could be worthwhile to establish competition with a different focus alongside the existing music competition that develop alternative criteria for performance and excellence with regard to the predominant freelance activities such as musical versatility excellent teaching and mediation of music, or successful entrepreneurship as a freelance musician. Yes, I shortened a lot.
Okay.
Music.
Now.
Music studies and studies on music competition can yield important studies on music competitions can yield important insight and usable benefits, for example, for music psychology research in areas such as giftedness development, personality assessment of talent, and social psychology, for music education and talent development, and for the design of practice and evaluation of music competition. That's why it makes sense to expand the research field musically talented in competition is worthwhile. Thank you for listening. I apologize for my past speaking. I had a very long text, and I was talking. And sometimes there was a danger to lose the overview.
It was condensed, but very rich in data and overview. Well, very comprehensive. Well, let's start with US. Music practice.
I thank you for your talk, and I think it's very important topic for research. I have a common question, regarding personality measurement. Personality measurement. You have quite a wide age range from 9 to 24 in the first study, and this also is really a very interesting personality development. And I'm just really use the same questionnaire in self-support for all participants. And I'm wondering if you have if you're making the same measurement way for the younger and older participants, and also if there are differences in personality regarding the competitors, whether they are younger or because I would expect to
yes, you're right. That is one of the limitations of this study. And I have no data concerning the age differences between the participants.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that.
Yeah. You're right.
Thank you.
Of course.
More questions?
Yes, that's it. Right. About the Chopin and piano competition and how the results of the competition depend on personality and nationality and all kinds of things. They also depend on the order in which the pieces are played. I'm wondering why you didn't mention that when you talked about WMusically. Is it less important, the objectivity of the prize-winning process in WMusically, or is it easier in that case to find the best people?
You are right. There are studies which show that the order of presentation plays a role, of course. But this was completely impossible to research in our studies. In our study, you must imagine that there were 2,500 participants at the same time in 20 different places in Paderborn who had their performances. And it is impossible to be in every performance. It's hundreds of performances. And so it's difficult to control
Color,
the
yeah.
order of
Because
presentation.
that research on Mathematica, I also know about it, but it was a limited number of, and she recorded, and then after the competition, she let the same jury to assess. Order of
You must keep in mind that the contests like Chopin contests or Neue Stimmen, they are out of more than 1,000 of young musicians, but in the last levels of the Wettbewerbs are only 10 or so. For instance, in the Neue Stimmen Wettbewerb in Germany, in the last round of the Wettbewerb are 10 participants. Of course, in this case, one can control for the order of presentations, but not if you have hundreds of performances.
Yeah. Oh, we have time for one question.
Yeah, question. Would you like? Well, I was just recording. So my question would be, how do you think that's, competition, okay, we can agree that they can reach, or like they get the best of us, okay? This competition was striving for better, trying to be faster and better, and so on. So how does this affect us back? What? Like the pressure that we actually gain doing these things,
You mean
that we always.
You mean the pressure on the?
He means, yeah, of the possible negative consequences. So,
yeah, one point we can get, like reach higher levels of playing, and everything, but
yeah,
less for the psychological damage perhaps it can be.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the former studies of Hans-Günther Bastian, they are asked for these things, and in fact, there are such things. And one of the studies Bastian conducted was a representative study with participants of Jung musiziert in the 80s. And he had more than 1,000 participants, and he did a cluster analysis, and he found 4 types of participants. And the greatest group, 60%, the greatest cluster, consisted of young people who very differentiate in a very differentiated way assess the competition. And typically, they said, on the one hand, they had very positive effects, and on the one hand, they also saw negative effects. For instance, pressure by parents or ambitious teachers and so on. And there was only a group of a cluster of 3% who only judged negatively. And all in all, the positive sides were overwhelming. So, and there are studies, for another study done by a PhD student from me, Andreas Haye. He studied high-performing young musicians who went to school on the one side, and the other side he studied music in Detmold Music University. And of course, they had time pressure and certain pressure to perform, conflicts with school, but they were able to manage it. The main problem is not the workload from school or from practicing. The main problem are social conflicts. Expectations also, perhaps, yeah. And there is there is some results I can show you through this theme. But all in all, it seems that the competitions, the positive effects are more than the negative. And that it would be worth to do case studies on this thing.
We could, if there, because we have to go on. Perhaps if you have the questions, you can ask in a coffee break.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Then